Well, hello and welcome to this week's video blog entitled Journey to Wholeness. I think this is number 20 from memory. So it's 5 months this week since a medical moment, otherwise called a stroke, Monday the 29th, I think it was, of October. So we continue to progress in our healing and journey. So next week I'll give you an update on some of the signs of health in terms of blood sugar levels and A1C3, but that's next week. So we're sitting in week 3 in the Christian calendar called Lent, and I've been sharing with you some thoughts about what it means to be a self. As I said last week, I believe being a person, being a self, has many dimensions to it, and so how do we explore the dimensions of being a person? I said last week that I find it helpful to think in terms of levels. That at the beginning, when we're an infant, we just have a body, we have no sense of self. We can't crawl, we can't talk, and so the body is all that one has. And then, as one learns to squeeze those hands and grasp, they discover their ability to grasp and crawl. And then they get more abilities in terms of walking. Then they acquire language. And with the language, you can then articulate no and yes, the early language of a child. No, don't want that, or yes. And then as they get older, they can articulate values. I want one of those. I don't want that. They can indicate their attitudes, go away, or I hate you, or I don't need you. And then as the person over time starts to develop beliefs. For example, when a person hits puberty, often they start to have beliefs about themselves. My body, I don't like my body. I want to be like her body. I believe I was kidnapped by aliens, or I believe I was born in the wrong family. You start to hear all sorts of beliefs about a self. And so to being a person is complex, and we have many levels. And as I said, if one part in yourself kind of changes rapidly, then it changes your sense of who you are. If you have, as I said last week, having a stroke, which is body, couldn't walk, couldn't use this arm, couldn't talk, then my sense of self, one goes into a sort of a la-la land, or chaos is another word I like to use, there, chaos. That's a self. And so people, writers, you can go back to Shakespeare, where the soliloquy from Hamlet, he anguishes of himself, or who he is, you know. And a lot of the tragedies, the behaviour of leaders, they are anguishing over what is that right thing to do behaviour. Should they or should they not kill this person? When Caesar is stabbed, or put the sword in, you know, so they all engage. So, you know, that's what it is. But we can counter it in our own life regularly if we, I suggest, pay attention. This incongruency, which is the opportunity for integration or reintegration. Walter Brueggemann, a famous scholar from the Old Testament, retired from Columbia Seminary here in Decatur, he says the function or the way of understanding the Psalms are the Psalms of orientation, disorientation, and a reorientation. So Scripture even helps us to understand that when we're orientated, we have a particular belief about ourselves. Like the couple last week, I talked in the premarital, their belief about themselves and why they wanted to get married. And then we have an experience of disorientation. And that has emotional valence to it, disorientation. And then we strive to reorientate. And so one way to, if you like to think about Lent, is what is your current orientation to self? And are you ready to be disorientated, and are willing to become reorientated. When I work with groups as a consultant in terms of leadership change and leadership theory, there are three things I say to a group. What is your capacity to change? What is the resistance to changing in your group? And what is your readiness to change? So in a couple counselling, you say, well, what's your capacity to forgive, change, right? Forgive. Why are you ready to forgive this week? Or do you want to stay angry for another 5 days before we'll deal with it? And why do you resist forgiving? Some people would rather go to hell than forgive someone and meet them in heaven. They're that angry, they resist the change. One time I was talking with a person who I asked if they'd be the treasurer in the church that I was serving at the time. And so we went out to lunch with this person, and I said, well, the reason we're going to lunch is I want to ask you, would you be willing to be the treasurer for church? He goes, yeah, so good. So, and then he looked at me and he said, I think, Father Paul, I'm the right person for the job. I said, that's good. And then he said, yes, he said, I am the smartest person I've ever met. And I thought, it's odd, like, well, let's pause and think about that kind of statement. In light of what I've just said, I would suggest, in terms of self-awareness, so the person is orientated towards their capacity. I can do that. And they give a plausible description. He didn't know evidence, because it's a self-enclosed system himself. Like, I'm the smartest person I've ever met. But people speak the other way. They say, he's the dumbest person I've ever met. You get the pattern? So now we can recognize the pattern by which people reveal themselves. I think that's the worst show. That's the best show. So people engage in what is referred to as overvaluing. You are the nicest, best priest I've ever met. That's overvaluing me or any other priest. Or the behaviour is called undervaluing. You're the worst, or you're the laziest. You're the worst priest I've ever heard. I mean, so there's undervaluing and overvaluing. And if you start to listen to the conversations, there are lots of opportunities to notice what you currently are missing. And so, as I said last week, we cannot stand in front of the mirror and take our spiritual clothes off and self-diagnose, because we miss things. But if a person listens to us and how we talk about our life and our self and our values, they do see what we don't see. They hear the comments that we don't hear, because we're not paying attention to what we say. We're paying attention to talking. And in psychotherapy and in spiritual writings, I point to Thomas Merton. His writings are helpful when he talks about the true self and the false self. So these topics, self, true, false self, have been in the material that some wonderful writers have, dug up and flipped over, like getting compass fork and turning it over. And if you read the spiritual classics, and if you know how to find them, go to a library or go to your local parish priest or pastor and say, what are some of the spiritual classics? The Rule of Benedict is what I follow. And in it describes behaviour which highlights the true following of God and a false following of God. So, of this view to consider is the self that you present in public, the false self which you want people to believe, like the person who was willing to be the treasure. It was apparently not true. He thought it was true. And as time went on, it became clear to many people that his belief about himself was in fact false. And so, how do we live with a person who's going through this? Well, we do it with grace, we do it with humility, we do it with courage, and we do it with love. To allow people to know that even though they've come to an awareness of themselves, which is painful, that's okay, because we're not here to inflict pain. We're here to offer the hand of friendship and of love, the caress of forgiveness, and embrace of love, all of which, of course, God is doing all the time. So, God blessings, and live well, live strong, live long. See you next week.